From hands big enough to crush nuts to muscles strong enough to lift pianos, all the way down to one of the world's smallest people, Jyoti Amge. At just 2 feet tall and weighing only 12 pounds, Amge holds the Guinness World Record for the shortest living mobile woman in the world. Born in Nagpur, India, Amge was just a normal baby at birth, but by the age of 4, her parents realized she didn't seem to be growing. You see, Amge has achondroplasia, a form of dwarfism. Not that she lets her height keep her down. On the contrary, it's meant she's traveled the world and met other amazing people like Ramisa Jelji, the world's tallest woman. With an astonishing height difference of over 5 feet, the two are a match nobody saw coming. Ramisa has Weaver syndrome, the condition that caused her extreme growth and that deep voice.
I have an impressive hearing ability.
She's the opposite of Amge, who naturally has a high voice due to her voice box being narrower than normal.
You are so beautiful.
Thank you.
Aww. And as for the world's tallest man, well, you won't believe what his life was like, but I've got some truly mind-blowing people to show you first. Meet French wrestling legend Andre the Giant. In 1973, he signed with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, where he became known as the 8th wonder of the world. Outside of the ring, Andre went on to become an actor, with his most famous role as Fezzik in The Princess Bride. He was so proud of his performance, he carried a videotape of it everywhere he went. Aww. The WWE billed Andre at 7 feet 4 inches tall and over 500 pounds. Here you can see the monstrous size of his hands as he holds a 12-ounce can of beer. Andre's great size was due to his pituitary gland, a small bean-shaped gland situated at the base of your brain, producing too much human growth hormone, or HGH. This condition is called gigantism, when symptoms appear before puberty like in Andre's case, and acromegaly when it occurs in later life. And you'll be hearing a lot more about it. Though it didn't stop him enjoying himself, Andre was coined by his friends as the greatest drunk on earth for his incredible chugging abilities. Fellow wrestler Hulk Hogan recalled an occasion when Andre downed 156 beers in one sitting. That's 14.6 gallons. Considering the average American could pass out from drinking 1.4 gallons in 2 hours, that's pretty darn impressive. There was a sad reason behind all this boozing, though. Andre's great height caused him to suffer from joint pain, and drinking was his way of numbing the discomfort. Whenever Andre was in New York, he was followed by an undercover cop because one time he drunkenly fell asleep on top of somebody whilst waiting for a taxi and seriously hurt him. Imagine having over 500 pounds of snoring giant fall on top of you. Another time, Andre got so smashed he fell asleep right there in the hotel lobby. There was no way the staff could heave the giant away, so they just cordoned him off with velvet rope and waited for him to wake up. Probably the wisest decision. While he may have been the life and soul of the party, Andre's story came to an end in Paris in 1993, where his heart finally gave out under the strain of his condition, aged 46. Nevertheless, his legend lives on. Another giant of pop culture comes from Game of Thrones. Hafthor Bjornsson played Sir Gregor Clegane, nicknamed the Mountain. A fitting nickname for sure. From Iceland, Hafthor is 6'9" and weighs a whopping 400 pounds. What most people don't know is that he wasn't always strong like this. Hafthor actually started as a basketball player and looked quite different back then. However, his career was cut short after a severe knee injury. That's when he decided to become a strongman, and in 2018 he became the first athlete to win World's Strongest Man, Europe's Strongest Man, and the Arnold Strongman Classic all in the same calendar year. Even today, Hafthor is still going strong. At the 2025 World Deadlift Championships, he deadlifted 1,124 pounds. That's heavier than a grand piano. To maintain his massive size, the Mountain swallows 10,000 calories a day, 4 times what the average man should eat. Bjornsson's diet manifests as 6 meals a day, forcing himself to chow down on lots of rice, egg, veggies, and meat. At this size, heaving around all that weight takes its toll on his body, making breathing and sleeping tricky. And if you're wondering where he got his height from, here he is with his father, grandfather, and a tiny sofa. But how did this strongman even end up becoming the Mountain anyway? Well, back in 2014, Bjornsson was just a bank security guard who trained as a strongman by night when he got a call from the casting department of Game of Thrones. They were filming in his native Iceland and needed someone big enough to intimidate and quick enough to wield a sword to play the villainous Gregor. The producers invited Bjornsson for an audition and, impressed, offered him the job days later. But if you're wondering why on earth someone called the Mountain is so low in this video, then obviously you need to stick around till the end. Now, Hongman Choi is a giant South Korean with many skills. First of all, he's a kickboxer and MMA fighter. In his prime, he measured 7'2" and weighed over 350 pounds. Imagine having to fight against this titan. After facing Jerome Le Banner, Banner said, "He's dangerous. His knees are already almost at the level of my head. He's not human." Never missing a chance for a laugh, Choi's nickname was Techno Goliath because he would dance to techno music after every victory. But that's just one side of Choi. He also has a very different line of work. He's a singer. In 2007, he formed a pop duo with a Korean supermodel named Kang Soo-hee called Beauty and the Beast. While it wasn't the most flattering name for Choi, it's sort of accurate. In South Korea, Choi is a celebrity and has endorsed many products over the years. However, anxiety from living in the public eye got the best of him, and since 2019, he's lived in the seclusion of Jeju Island, far from prying eyes. Someone who seems to be enjoying the limelight is Olivier Richters. He has the unique distinction of holding the Guinness World Record for being the tallest professional bodybuilder on the planet, at 7'2" and weighing over 330 pounds. To put his gigantic size into perspective, Olivier constantly towers over other notoriously huge bodybuilders. For example, this photo with Martin Ford, who's already really tall at 6'8". What's even more incredible is that Olivier had to overcome a birth defect, pectus excavatum, a deformity on the wall of his chest nearly 3 inches deep that compressed his heart to 80% of its normal size. He went through surgery to get it fixed age 23, which wasn't easy. He had to have 8 of his ribs broken. Ouch! Afterwards, he spent 2 months on morphine where he said he couldn't even move. That was followed by another 2 months of rehabilitation, and after 4.5 months, he was pushing weights at the gym. What a powerhouse! Aside from working out, Olivier has taken up acting, appearing as Big Bruisers in The Kingsman, Dial of Destiny, and Borderlands. He's even got his own nutrition company. That's a pretty good line of business for a bodybuilder. He has easy access to all the protein he needs. I guess being a basketball player is a pretty obvious profession if you're a giant. So that's what Yao Ming did. Reaching a height of 7'6", by the time of his final season, Yao was the tallest active player in the NBA, which is saying a lot. Born in China, basketball runs in Yao's family. Both his parents were players as well. He started his career in China playing for the Shanghai Sharks, but eventually made his way into the NBA. In 2002, Yao Ming started playing for the Houston Rockets and then retired in 2011 because of several injuries to his feet and knees. During his prime, Yao was a famous athlete worldwide, probably the most famous in China, with several huge sponsorship deals throughout his career. There's even a documentary about him called The Year of the Yao, about his rookie year in the NBA. When he went back to China, Yao Ming actually bought his former team, the Shanghai Sharks, in 2009, before selling his stake off again 10 years later for an estimated $73.2 million. Now that's living like a baller. Way back in 2012, Yao Defen, one of the few women in this video, actually held the Guinness World Record for being the tallest woman alive, and reportedly stood somewhere between 7'7" or 8 inches tall. Even when she was just 11 years old, she was about 6 foot 2 inches tall. She joined a sports school to study basketball, but one day she collapsed on the court. After a medical examination, she finally learned the reason for her unbelievable size: a tumor in her pituitary gland causing it to secrete too much growth hormone. Unfortunately, she was born to a poor family and couldn't afford proper medical care. In 2006, when she was 34, she finally had an operation to remove the tumor, but she continued to be plagued with health issues. Throughout her life, crowds flocked to gawk at Yao's appearance, leaving her isolated and untrusting of the outside world. In 2009, she spoke openly about the misery her extraordinary height brought her, saying, "Why am I this tall? If I weren't, people wouldn't look at me this way." It was only after the Guinness World Records were notified about her in 2010 that she became famous throughout the world. She was even visited by the tallest man in China, Zhang Junkai, after she suffered a fall and was hospitalized. Tragically, Yao's life came to an end in 2012 at her home in Anhui Province, aged 39 or 40, though the cause of death was never publicly disclosed. Even in her final days, her body appeared to still be growing, possibly due to a portion of the tumor that remained. Rest in peace. However, some giants do go on to lead happy lives, like Sultan Kozan, who holds the title for the tallest man alive. In 2009, Guinness World Records recorded his height at 8 feet 1 inches. 2 years later, the 26-year-old had grown to nearly 8 foot 3 inches. No one seems to even be close to his height. In fact, Sultan is so tall that he needs crutches to walk. Sultan's growth didn't start until he was 10 years old, and it only stopped when he was 28. His size is due to that pituitary gland pumping out too much HGH again. Thankfully, in 2010, he had gamma knife surgery on the tumor affecting it, putting an end to his rapid growth. Sultan says the advantage of being this tall is that he can easily help his family with domestic tasks like changing light bulbs. However, the disadvantages are not being able to find clothes that fit him and not being able to fit into an average-sized car. Nowadays, Sultan is a part of the Magic Circus of Samoa and performs in various shows throughout the world. In 2013, Sultan actually got married. He was almost 3 feet taller than his wife, who is 5'8". But the biggest problem between them wasn't height, it was communication. That's because they speak different languages. Sultan speaks Kurdish and Turkish, while his wife only speaks Arabic. Or should I say ex-wife? Believe it or not, that was the reason they got divorced in 2021. I guess love doesn't transcend the language barrier. As for now, Sultan continues traveling the world, hoping one day he might find that special someone. Now over to Denis Saplinkov, a Ukrainian bodybuilder and arm wrestling champion. In 2016, he was recorded standing at 6'1" and weighing 308 pounds of pure muscle. But what truly makes him stand out is his abnormal-sized hands. They're so big, many people think his pictures are photoshopped. Rest assured, they're not. His wrists measure at an insane 9.5 inches thick, and his biceps are 25 inches in circumference. Without a doubt, these features helped him win several international arm wrestling competitions. Watch this video of him easily crushing walnuts with his bare hands. That's enough to strike fear into anyone's heart. Or nuts. All this training takes its toll on the body, and in 2019, while lifting a weight that was just too heavy, Saplinkov was hospitalized after rupturing blood vessels near his kidney. This led him to get neuritis, an inflammation of nerves that left half his face paralyzed. Thankfully, it was cured through rehabilitation, but his ailments meant that in 2023, his body had shrunk to less than 270 pounds. After trying to get back into arm wrestling, his health issues have sadly forced him into a hiatus. Still, there's hope that one day he'll recover enough to make a comeback. Sajjad Ghoribi is known on the internet as the Iranian Hulk, or the Persian Hercules. It's not hard to figure out why. This Iranian man claims to weigh around 340 pounds and stands at 6 foot 2 inches tall, and says his upper body is close to the size of a giant redwood tree. He went viral after people discovered his Instagram page where he displayed his impressive size. He can also be seen holding normal everyday objects that put in perspective just how massive he is. Yeah, I'm not convinced. I've never seen a body shaped like that. Nevertheless, Garabi wanted to cash in on his internet fame and go toe-to-toe with the nightmare himself, Martin Ford. Signing on with Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, the pair were due to clash at London's O2 Arena in 2020. Fans held their breath as they butted heads in a pre-fight standoff, but everyone thought, Sajjad doesn't look that tall. Then this happened. Oh dear. But never fear, Garabi stands. He wasn't gonna go down that easily. Okay, maybe he was. Ford and the world saw that the Iranian Hulk wasn't the giant he and his promoters claimed him to be. The Nightmare subsequently canceled the fight, scared that he might accidentally kill Garabi. In an interview, Ford told all, claiming that Garabi's struggles with mental health had been hammered by social media and was misrepresented by his promotional team.
He went and had the interview on TV, he cried. His parents came on, disowned him. And for me, I phoned up the organiser. I can't fight this guy.
Some sources list Garabi's actual height at 5 foot 10 inches, though there's so many lies around this guy it's hard to tell what's true and false anymore. Despite his humiliation against Ford, though, he did try fighting again in 2022, this time against Jumanov Almatbakitavich, the Kazakh Titan.
Oh my days. He's turning.
Bakitavich was declared the winner after 2 rounds. To me, it seems like Garabi posted Photoshop images on Insta, gained a big following, and then got in way over his head. What's the world come to, eh? Next you'll be saying Khan Baba is a fake. Spoiler alert, he is. At least this Pakistani Instagram celebrity has a sense of humor about it though. Coming up, the tallest man ever. On February 22nd, 1918, Addie Wadlow from Alton, Illinois gave birth to an 8.7-pound baby named Robert Pershing Wadlow. Robert was born happy, healthy, and for all intents and purposes, normal. Like most babies, Robert started to grow over the course of his first year of life, but soon enough it became apparent that he was also growing alarmingly fast. Within 6 months, he already weighed 30 pounds, and on his first birthday, he was up to 45 pounds. Oh, and he was 3 feet 3.5 inches tall, too. Little did anyone know Robert Wadlow's baffling growth spurt wasn't going to stop anytime soon. In fact, it would eventually make him a household name. Although it was apparent that their son wasn't quite like other kids, Robert's parents tried to make his childhood as normal as possible. As the eldest of 2 younger brothers and 2 sisters, he was expected to participate in the same activities as his siblings, no matter how difficult it seemed. By his 5th birthday, Robert had reached 5 feet 4 inches and was already wearing clothes that were intended for teenagers. When he turned 8 years old, he had exceeded his father Harold F. Wadlow's height of 5 feet 11 inches by an additional 3 inches. To accommodate his beanstalk-like stature at elementary school, a special desk had to be made to support his frame. As far as the other kids in the class could tell, Robert was already a real-life giant. But he still had a whole lot more growing to do.
I'm Robert Wadlow, 12 years old, and weigh 240 pounds, and I'm about 7 feet tall. These boys grouped around me are about the same age as I am. They go to the same grade. I like to play baseball, basketball, and football.
At home, he towered over his 4 younger siblings. When most children were still being carried around by their parents, Robert was able to lift his 150-pound father up the stairs of their family home like a puppy. At age 13, he officially became the world's tallest Boy Scout at an incredible 7 feet 4 inches. To take part in activities with the rest of the boys, Robert was provided with a custom-made uniform, tent, and sleeping bag. At the time, he was already consuming 5 times as many calories as typical boys his age. In fact, his daily calorie consumption is said to have peaked at 8,000 calories. A typical breakfast during his teen years consisted of 8 eggs, 12 slices of toast, several glasses of orange juice, 5 cups of coffee, and plenty of cereal. If anyone was allowed to use the growing lad excuse while scoffing down seconds, it was Robert Wadlow. When he turned 17 in 1935, Wadlow had amazingly surpassed the 8-foot mark, making him, unsurprisingly, the tallest teenager ever. The first of many titles he would officially be awarded in his extraordinary life. But what caused this otherwise regular boy from Alton, Illinois to soar sky high within so few years? The team of doctors at Barnes Hospital in St. Louis who examined Wadlow in 1929 were able to diagnose him with hyperplasia of the pituitary gland. But in those days, most surgeons simply weren't confident enough to operate on him. Even at the time of his death, it was reported that Wadlow's body was continuing to grow and had shown no signs of stopping anytime soon. Apparently, Robert was sick of being asked, "Hey, how's the weather up there?" In fact, when he was 18, Robert remarked that he hadn't heard a new joke about his height in 3 years. Although he was a relatively healthy child who enjoyed all the things most normal children did, Robert did have to deal with some major drawbacks as a result of his condition. Due to his extreme height, he suffered from a general lack of feeling in his lower legs and feet. If he did feel anything, it was nothing more than a constant tingling like pins and needles. This is because his heart also had trouble circulating blood to the ends of his long limbs. By age 10, Robert's feet were deemed cyanotic, meaning they had an unnatural blue color due to his poor circulation. But Robert was determined not to let his condition get the better of him, and he never once used a wheelchair to get around despite how sensitive his limbs were. When he was 14, Robert stumbled only slightly while pushing a boy on a tricycle and ended up breaking 2 bones in his foot. As a result, he wore specially made iron leg braces for a while, which he would sometimes opt for throughout his later life. Although the braces offered much needed support for Robert's extraordinary legs, little did he know they would later be his downfall. But more on that later. Shortly after Robert Wadlow graduated from Alton High School in 1936, he landed himself in the Guinness World Records book as the tallest living man in the world, measuring 8 feet 7 inches at just 19 years old. Still, Robert had dreams just like anyone else, and he enrolled himself in Shirtlift College on a scholarship with the intention of studying law. But he lasted only 1 semester. Robert's enormous hands, which measured 12.7 inches from the wrist to the tip of his middle finger, the world's biggest on record, could barely hold a pencil for note-taking in lectures, and the realities of campus life became too hard to bear. Robert's dream of becoming a lawyer may have withered and died on the vine, but little did he know his life was about to take a rather unexpected turn. Thanks to the publicity his story received throughout childhood, Robert had been noticed by the famous Ringling Brothers and their traveling circus. They knew he would make an excellent addition to their show, particularly when he was showcased alongside the troupe of little people they already had employed by the circus. And now that Robert was an adult, they wanted to be the first to seal a deal. At the time, traveling carnivals like the Ringling Brothers, P.T. Barnum Circus, and the Dobrich International Circus were a pretty big deal. The main show would be accompanied by a smaller side show, which usually saw a bunch of freaks performing under the same tent according to a nightly program. The performers could be anything from bearded ladies to conjoined twins, dwarves, and contortionists. For these people who had been born different and would inevitably be denied the respect they deserved in the real world, joining the circus was one of their very few ways of making any money. Circus owners were always looking for new ways to wow their audiences, and Robert Wadlow, a walking, talking giant, certainly fit the bill. During his time at the circus, Robert was marketed as the Alton Giant, or the Giant of Illinois, and became so wildly popular that he appeared in the center ring rather than the sideshow almost immediately. Although he was a huge hit with audiences and drew crowds from all over the country, Robert wasn't a natural-born performer and didn't care much for the colorful and extravagant world of the carnival. He only accepted their offer under a specific set of terms. The circus would provide a hotel suite for Robert and his father and pay all their expenses. During his performances, he dressed in a conservative business suit and refused the circus's request to be dressed in a top hat and tails that would accentuate his figure. Thanks to the fame he had achieved while traveling with the circus, Robert also came to the attention of Peter's Shoe Company in 1938, who offered him a job as a spokesperson on a promotional tour. This was a blessing in disguise for Robert, who had whopping 18.5-inch feet, which is the equivalent of a US size 37 AA, unsurprisingly earning him the title of largest feet ever. The company promised to provide Robert with free shoes for as long as he worked with them. This was a welcome bonus because his shoes, which had to be specially made and reinforced with metal parts, usually cost him $100 a pop, which is almost $2,000 today. It seemed like a no-brainer. Besides, Robert could see himself working in advertising rather than exhibiting himself as a freak for punchers down at the circus. Now that his son was getting booked for appearances all over the country, Henry Wadlow modified the family car by removing the passenger seat so that Robert could sit in the back and stretch out his legs. Together, the father and son visited over 800 towns in 41 states to promote the Missouri-based shoe company, traveling over 300,000 miles in the process. Soon, other companies around the U.S. followed suit and offered Robert various gigs promoting their own products. When Robert wasn't performing in the center ring of America's biggest circuses or touring the country promoting shoes, he enjoyed a quiet family life with his parents and siblings. His friends and family described him as mild-mannered and polite, earning him the nickname Gentle Giant, which was a spin on one of his circus monikers, the Gentleman Giant. Although he had an exciting and vibrant career thanks to his unique build, it still made doing even the most basic things incredibly difficult. Like Gulliver in the land of the Lilliputans, Robert lived in a world where everything had been designed for people much smaller than him. Homes, public spaces, and basic household items weren't well equipped for his height, and he had to make concessions and adjustments just to be able to perform the simplest of tasks. When sitting down at tables, for example, Robert couldn't bend his legs for fear of knocking everything off. Instead, he had to keep them straight, which meant he was at risk of easily tripping people up. Almost everything he owned was custom made, from his clothes, which required about 3 times as much material as normal adult clothes, to his 9.5-foot bed frame at home. When he stayed at hotels, multiple beds had to be pushed together to accommodate him. Meanwhile, normal leisure activities like going to the movies were totally out of the question. It ain't easy being a real-life giant. In 1937, Robert's parents had made plans to build their son a house that was scaled perfectly for his tremendous size. The doors would be 9 feet high, the ceilings 11 feet, and even the stairs themselves would be 2 feet each. All the furniture would be specially made and fitted, including a 10-foot bathtub, which would have cost a hefty $1,000 on its own. Unfortunately, because of the extortionate costs involved in the project and the complications of actually building it, the house never came to fruition. Although Robert had hung up his showbiz hat long ago, crowds still gathered around him wherever he went. It seemed like everyone wanted to get a piece of the world's tallest man. On June 2, 1936, a medical doctor named Charles Humbert visited Robert and his family at their home. According to the Wadlows, the doctor was very rude and intrusive, and Robert ultimately refused to cooperate with Humbert or be examined by him. In a bid to get back at the family, Humbert chose to trash Robert in a paper he published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The write-up, which claimed to be about the giant's mental processes, painted Robert as a moody, surly introvert who was bitter about his condition. What's worse, Humbert openly challenged praise from Robert's teachers regarding his intelligence and instead insisted that he had defective attention, stating that all functions that we attribute to the highest centers of in the frontal lobes are languid and blurred. It's safe to say the Wadlows were not pleased, so they decided to sue the scathing doctor for libel to the tune of $100,000. The trial, which was held in St. Joseph, Missouri, became quite a media event, and thousands of people waited outside the courthouse to catch a glimpse of the world's tallest man in the flesh. Unfortunately, the Wadlows lost the suit after the judge concluded that it couldn't be proven that Humbert's description wasn't accurate on the day he met him. Sure thing, Doc. By 1940, 22-year-old Robert usually walked with a cane and had been fitted with permanent iron leg braces to support his height and keep him upright. But because of the general lack of feeling in his lower legs, Robert didn't notice that one of the braces was dangerously rubbing against his ankle. While making an appearance at Michigan's Manatee National Forest Festival on behalf of the shoe company he represented, a blister formed and quickly became infected. Hospitals in the local area refused to treat Robert because their amenities couldn't accommodate his immense size, so the infection was left to linger. Thanks to his condition, Robert also had a weakened immune system. As things worsened, he developed a fever of 106 degrees, and doctors were finally forced to perform a minor surgery to give him a blood transfusion, but it was to no avail. On July 15th, the news broke. The world's tallest man was dead. Just 18 days before Robert Wadlow succumbed to the fatal infection and passed away in his sleep, he had been measured for the final time and clocked in at a colossal 8 feet 11.1 inches, weighing 439 pounds. If it hadn't been for the ill-fitting brace, he would have been the first living man to surpass the 9-foot mark. He was laid to rest in his hometown of Alton, Illinois, in Oakwood Cemetery in Madison County. At his funeral, he was placed in a custom-made casket that reached a total length of 10 feet 9 inches, 32 inches wide, and weighed 1,000 pounds. The massive casket stuck out the back of the hearse that carried it, so a black cloth had to be draped over the doors to cover the remainder. It took a dozen men and 8 assistants to carry the casket during the procession, and a staggering 46,000 people showed up to pay their final respects to the gentle giant who walked among them. Robert Wadlow may have died young, but he left behind an incredible legacy. In 1985, a life-size bronze statue was erected in Alton on the campus of the Southern Illinois University School of Dental Medicine. 3 other Wadlow statues have since been placed in Guinness World Records museums around North America, while several wax models of the Alton giant reside in Ripley's Believe It or Not museums, some in ginormous caskets, others towering over crowds of tourists. There's even an exhibit dedicated to celebrating Wadlow's life at the Alton Museum of History and Art, which features photographs as well as a few pairs of his custom shoes, his 3rd grade school desk, and his graduation cap and gown. But these commemorative exhibits are the only physical reminders of Robert's extraordinary life. To preserve his image and discourage collectors from profiting off of his incredible disability as simply freak memorabilia, Robert's mother had nearly all of his personal belongings destroyed after his death. The Wadlows also feared that Robert's body might be dug up, possibly by doctors hoping to examine him, so his coffin was placed in a solid concrete vault where he has remained ever since. To this day, no one has beaten Robert Wadlow's record as the tallest man to ever live. However, one man did find himself eligible for both world's tallest and world's smallest man in one lifetime, Mr. Adam Rayner. Very little is known about the details of Adam Rayner's personal life outside of his extraordinary medical condition. All we do know is that he was born in the city of Graz in Austria in 1899 to parents who were both of average height. His father was 5 foot 6 inches tall, while his mother was 5 foot 4 inches tall. As he grew up, it soon became apparent that Adam wasn't developing at the same rate as most kids, and as far as height was concerned, he was certainly on the smaller side. Nevertheless, his parents disregarded his small stature and continued to love and support Adam as any mother and father should. Although he would be treated as equal by his peers growing up, life definitely wasn't going to be a walk in the park for poor Adam. At age 16, Adam stood a mere 4 foot 6 inches tall, far below the average for a boy of his age. When he turned 18, he had only grown an additional 0.3 inches. Adam didn't see his height as a disadvantage, and he was determined not to let being little get in the way of his big dreams. In fact, when the First World War broke out in 1914, Adam had tried to enlist himself in the army, but he was told he was too short and too weak to be accepted. Still, he didn't give up. A year later, Adam decided to apply again, but it was another resounding no based on height and strength alone. When he turned 19, Adam stood at a remarkably short 4 foot 8.3 inches. His new height meant he could officially be classed as a dwarf, which is by definition any adult who is less than 4 foot 10 inches tall. But little did Adam know he would not only grow the extra 2 inches needed to be classed as average height, instead, he would eventually skyrocket beyond the confines of so-called normality and into another realm entirely, gianthood. Although it was definitely far shorter than expected for a boy his age, those who'd refused his application to enroll in the army had also noted one other thing. Adam's hands and feet were abnormally large. When he tried to enlist the first time, Adam was already wearing shoes sized US 10, which seemed totally disproportionate to the rest of his body. Just 3 years later, his feet had already doubled to a US size 20. For some perspective regarding how large that really is, American basketball player Shaquille O'Neal wears shoes sized US 22, and he's over 7 foot tall. When you consider the fact that Adam's height remained relatively static during this time, it probably looked like he was wearing ridiculous clown shoes that were far too big for him. To add to his already strange proportions, medical records also showed that the young man was unusually thin and had trouble putting on weight. When he hit 21, which is generally considered to be the age where the average person stops growing, it was assumed that Adam Rayner's cartoonish small stature would be fixed for life, but that's exactly when everything changed. As he made his way through his 20s, Adam suddenly started growing at an alarming rate. His growth spurt over the next decade or so was unlike anything anyone could have anticipated. He literally shot up like a beanstalk, and by the time he reached 33, he'd grown from just under 4 foot 10 inches to a shocking 7 foot 1 inches. In many ways, this was what Adam had been waiting for all his life, but it was both a blessing and a curse. Around the same time, he started to develop a severe curvature of the spine, an ailment that had become visible around 1925 to 1926 and would burden him for the rest of his life, ultimately becoming his downfall. Although he was now considered a very tall man indeed, Adam's growth spurt showed no signs of stopping anytime soon. Every doctor who examined him became dumbfounded at the unprecedented change in height and couldn't quite explain why it was happening in the first place. Eventually, 2 doctors named A. Mandel and F. Windholz decided to try and unravel this medical mystery. Between the 25th of August 1930 and the 23rd of May 1931, the pair examined Adam and found him to be 7 feet 1 inches tall with an official standing height of 6 feet 9.1 inches due to the growing curve in his spine. But what had caused this otherwise ordinary man to transform from a so-called dwarf into a towering giant in the space of just a decade? Mandel and Windholz began to suspect that Adam may have developed a specific kind of tumor that caused an extreme case of, stop me if you've heard this before, acromegaly. Besides having an immense effect on growth height-wise, acromegaly also impacts hand and feet size, which explains Adam's bizarre proportions before the rest of his body had a chance to catch up. In addition to his towering height, Adam's face had also become elongated due to a protruding forehead and jaw. Meanwhile, his lips had become thicker and his teeth more widely spaced, all of which are common symptoms of acromegaly. This image, which is not of Adam Rayner, shows the shocking effects acromegaly can have on an ordinary man's face over time. When they wrapped up their studies in 1931, Mandel and Windholz concluded that their hypothesis was indeed correct. Rayner's extraordinary growth was caused by, you guessed it, a tumor that was forcing the body to secrete an excess of HGH. The operation to remove the offending tumor was very risky and had a small chance of success because it had already been growing inside Adam for more than 10 years. Regardless of the potential repercussions, the doctors decided to go ahead with the operation anyway. On December 2nd, 1930, Adam Rayner was operated on by Professor O. Hirsch. The tumor was removed, but Adam's problems were far from over yet. Several months after the surgery, he went back for a checkup with the doctors. They were pleased to see that his height had remained the same as when he was measured before the operation, with a standing height of 6 feet 9.1 inches. But his spinal curvature was now even worse than before. Adam's spine had increasingly curved sideways during his growth spurt and was now causing some major problems. This indicated that although it was occurring at a much slower rate, Adam was in fact still growing. As the years grew on, Adam's health problems only worsened. Towards the end of the 1920s, as he approached his 30s, Adam's eyesight had started to deteriorate. Although he was still able to read, he had become nearly blind in his right eye. A tumor on the pituitary gland, which is the cause of 98% of all acromegaly cases, can compress the eye's optic nerves, which is likely the cause of Rayner's loss of vision. As if that wasn't bad enough, at the same time, Adam's hearing became worse and he became deaf in his right ear. Not only was he now considered a giant wherever he went, but he couldn't see on his right side nor hear on his left. It's safe to say things weren't looking too peachy. Having a normal appetite up until that point, Adam also began to experience difficulty with eating and keeping his food down. During the later years of Adam's life, the curve in his spine took such a hold of his body that he could no longer walk for extended periods. In the end, he would wind up totally bedridden and unable to care for himself properly. Eventually, Adam was admitted to a home of the aged where he would receive the support he needed to carry out daily tasks. Although he now had the benefit of assisted living, he died on the 4th of March 1950 in Vienna, Austria at just 51 years old. When he was last measured before his death, Adam Rayner measured a staggering 7 foot 8 inches tall. Although some newspaper reports claimed he was actually 7 foot 10 inches, likely due to the curve in his spine. This incredible feat makes him the only person in history to be considered both a dwarf and a giant in the space of just one lifetime. Adam Rayner may have been the world's littlest giant, but his incredible story just goes to show what a testament he is to the marvels of the human body. Which giant impressed you the most? Do you think Wadlow's record will ever be beaten? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.